Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 379, How to Be a Yogi. This is by the American Yogic Society, if I remember correctly. Link in the description to my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links to my books, blogs. 76 pages, so an intermediate to short read. But it's fairly dense, and it goes through several main things. First, it attempts to give the different categories of yoga. So there's like Hatha Yoga. That's generally conceived of as the lowest level, or not necessarily lowest, but most physical. And that's mostly physical training for health and stuff. Hatha Yoga. Then there's Raja Yoga, and that's more mental. Then there's Karma Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and Gnani Yoga. And those are sort of the 5 degrees. And as you go up, they become more purely spiritual. So at the bottom, it's physical. Then it's mental. Then it's kind of a fusion with spiritual. Then it's like super spiritual, and then it's like attempting to effectively gain one with godhood in an Eastern sort of way. It'd be difficult to explain to a mainly Western audience, so I won't bother. So it goes through those, talks about the practices, the idea behind them, etc., the goals of these different groups. And of course it points out if someone is really low in their karmic development, probably not going to achieve a huge amount in yoga. Probably, though, we can get them to master Hatha Yoga, and it will do them spiritual good, and they'll be taking the first step on the road to enlightenment, essentially. And then they reincarnate. Next time they can do Raja Yoga, maybe, or something. So that part's interesting because it describes yoga as a tradition and sort of the backdrop to it as well, and especially the spiritual side. Then it talks about the breathing techniques that are used. Of course, this pairs with Hatha Yoga in general. Hatha Yoga is mostly yogic poses. It's what Westerners generally conceive of as yoga. Many of them don't do the spiritual part of it. Raja Yoga, maybe, in a roundabout way, but mostly it's Hatha. If they're not Hindus. If they're Hindus, they probably at least read about and dabble with these other yogic forms. Otherwise, again, Hatha, maybe elements of Raja Yoga. And the breathing techniques are further spoken of, specifically in the context of health. Now, this is something that would apply to a Western audience at this time. You got to understand, this is during the height of tuberculosis. This is when people are afraid of sewer gas, killing them randomly when they're walking down the street. This is when people are, there's a germophobic awareness of virulence in general. People are spraying carbolic acid everywhere to try to sanitize things and so forth. They're dabbling with societal experimentation on an organized level that hadn't been before. It was a very paranoid, frenetic, sick population in the late early 1900s. You got an explosion of population due to industry, but medicine hasn't really caught up yet until about the 1940s and 50s, really. And so you get a lot of Eastern traditions when they're related to health influencing Western culture. This is a great example, and therefore delves into the breathing techniques and says, look, if you learn how to breathe properly, in the right way, with the right frame of mind, you can effectively eliminate disease. Now, is this true? It's true that oxygenating yourself more through proper breathing as opposed to shallow chest breathing has health benefits. Will it cure everything? No. It will not cure cancer. That's bullshit, homeopathic garbage, nonsense that dates to 100 years ago. Some people, for some reason, still believe it. It will not cure your blindness. It will not make the lame to walk. But it will improve your health, just like getting a good diet, getting good exercise. It doesn't make you immune to disease, but it makes you more able to fight it off. It contributes towards your overall health, slowing the aging process potentially in the process. It also contains at the end a section on Jesus. Because, of course, again, the audience reading this was virtually all Christians, and some people, liberal Christians / secular, of course, reluctant atheists, maybe you could call them, but a general belief in Jesus. And the yogic principle is that Jesus was a yogi master, and it goes through specifically talking about some of his quotes, his life and works, how this overlaps. And indeed, if you look at these principles, which were developed completely separately from Judeo-Christianity, you're talking about principles that are thousands of years old. They date to before this period. They did not influence largely, or at least directly, maybe through the Persians at times, directly any of those Mediterranean religious systems on a large level. Although there would have been some trade and awareness, the influence and attempts to convert weren't really there. And yet you do have a significant similarity in what they would conceive of as being a yogic master physically, mentally, and spiritually, and the tale of Jesus. And the conclusion is that while he didn't practice Hinduism, he didn't explicitly practice yoga in the aware sense, he was effectively doing the same thing by default, arguably purifying him even further, because he didn't even have to study the traditions in order to understand the concept. Of course, some groups think, well, Jesus the Esse, certain Christian groups, would say, well, he would have been aware of Zoroastrian and other similar lore, and there would have been Hindu influence. Possibly. It's not beyond the realm of possibility if you assume that this figure existed, but we don't have that direct causal link. We don't have proof of this happening. We just have a roundabout speculation. But anyway, it's a very good work. I've got several other yogic works that I've managed to obtain recently as well. I'm interested more now. I want to meander off more into Hinduism and Freemasonry as two major topics, as well as continuing a lot of herbal lore, because that's always my main interest, because I like plants. That's about all. Peace out.